Shubh has been kind. He has shut the doors, so you can't run away now. And to Kigali and KGD 2020, 2022, these are, you can start right now. Okay, so I decided to speak from the heart. The subject that the organizers thought of giving me is discovering the new isms. And I thought, what is the most important ism that can stay with you even if you forget everything else? So there's no point in me telling you a ton of information that you already have and perspectives that you probably already are going to hear through the remaining 1.5 days. But it occurred to me to say that emerging digital societies, ladies and gentlemen, would need one ism on our part, just one, though the organizers want me to say it in plural. And that, to my mind, is driven by a man called Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin told us that the ability of humans, or any species for that matter, to look at the future would lie in our adaptability. So I decided to suggest before you an ism called adaptabilism. Adaptabilism is a bit of a tongue twister, but as we speak about it in the next few minutes, the effort is to tell you that as Charles Darwin wrote, and we have seen, the strongest don't navigate the future all too well. The example of the dinosaur is much too obvious. Likewise, the most attractive, whether we look at any species, doesn't necessarily have a way for the future. The example, since the Mauritian minister is here, of the dodo is there. It's a very nice looking bird from what I saw in my 3 years there, in the sketchbooks and in the natural history museums, but the dodo didn't survive either because it was unable to adapt to the landing of humans on Mauritian soil. The bird was much too trusting and didn't run away when they saw the Dutch. And the Dutch liked it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that was the end of the dodo. So what if we as human beings, ladies and gentlemen, embrace one single idea emanating out of some substratum, which I shall propose? Adaptabilism will not just differentiate us from dinosaurs and dodos. The digitalists inside us are going to face a world which we as leaders don't necessarily know about. So if we don't know about something, we leaders, each one of us at any rate, CEOs of our lives, tend to pull everybody in a particular direction based on our instinct and our experience. But honestly, in my humble opinion, we are like captains of a spaceship. We have some idea of the galaxy, not quite. We have some idea of the controls, but our control is limited to a joystick. And even if we get it wrong by 1 degree, we would have landed the spaceship in Pluto. And we'd have no ability to navigate life on Pluto. So even if I'm exaggerating a bit, the future in the digital society is going to throw up change and a reordering of the world's forces in a manner that we have heard right through the last few hours of deliberation. But the mindset, the adaptabilism that I propose before you should be on making sure that we are ready for a lot more than, say, a bipolar world that stared us in 1980s. That we presently have no idea whether Madagascar is going to win the race, or Indonesia, or maybe Rwanda, perhaps our friends from Mali. So if we really don't know how the future is going to look like and which forces will combine together to throw up challenges before us as leaders, we need to have a leader's mindset. And the mindset is, quite frankly, one of saying, look, 80% I will lead my cavalry, the cavalry as community, as Samir put it the other day. But 20% folks in the room don't need to agree with me. 20% of the people can be outliers. And I covet their view, their thought process, their counter, their pragmatism, a whole lot more than I would in a traditional leadership mindset. Because when we don't know what are the bets that will require to stack up, we should invest in those who are outliers in this room or in a tent or in a leadership context of community or country. We should know that they might get it right. So we must nurture them with the mindset of a startup, that these guys are small. They don't necessarily have the full vision, but they need to keep working for the betterment of sheer adaptabilism that is required to navigate the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the digitalists and leaderships need to think and listen to the voices, all right, in the farthest corners. But once heard, these voices need to be processed at speed and scale. Now that again is the beauty of digital societies that stare us, that the speed and scale of response required is very different from the analog world and fairly cruel. So if we don't have capacities inbuilt in our mindsets already, we will be in serious trouble. And apparent contrarianism could be baffling, but do think about it. It might be a useful skill to nurture in your own teams. Digitalists and leaders need to distinguish, of course, between news and noise. So some of my friends here, Pranjal, you would appreciate that immediately, that while 20% of the people are, welcome Minister, so while 20% of the people would be looking at things differently from us, we need to therefore make sure that, Samir, some of these points are yours, so you shouldn't have been coming in, because you might raise your hand and say, I said it already. So, we were talking about we were talking about the concept of some isms which will help us navigate the digital society. And among the, while I was told to narrate quite a few isms in plural, just to sing for my supper, I have decided to focus only on one, and that is adaptabilism. You have to adapt, and you have to make sure that you are not left in the lurch as a dodo or as a dinosaur, as the case may be. So digital leaders then need to distinguish between news and noise. Sometimes the contrarians would say, oh, but then you have to listen to us. You needn't. You can tell them to wait for their turn. New voices need to be nurtured as startups, a point that I already made. But there is also an even more traditional and compelling need for execution. So all ideas are a great thing to be, but ORF has always been a think and action tank. So thinking should be followed very quickly by projects that are already in the action mode, and that, ladies and gentlemen, would make adaptabilism a lot easier than probably was needed when Columbus, for example, discovered the Americas, or some of the tectonic events allowed us a space of years and decades to get ready. And the world, as I said, was still a choice between one of the two superpowers. We knew who was going to win, but we could still bet on the other. Today, there are ample possibilities of pretty unknown powers coming to the fore. And I mentioned in particular Rwanda, I mentioned India, and I mentioned Mauritius, I mentioned Maldives. So the high table will actually not just have 2 or 3 or 4 players. It will be a much longer table with people having collaborations on bilateral front, and the ability to distinguish between what needs to be captured in toto and in part needs to be the leader's job here on. In this changed and unpredictable order, the projects we spoke and talked about could be in the farthest corner of the tent. They don't need to be coming from the front rows or from those who have traditionally controlled the narrative. And mindfulness about that is going to also determine how we navigate together the digital society that is unfolding as we talk. Think of yourselves as the captain of a spaceship. I submitted, but I'll repeat it for the benefit of Minister. We are like captains of a spaceship, and we have to understand that if we get it even wrong by a degree, we could land on another planet. And that, again, is something that would possibly be all right, so long as we are adaptable enough to able to navigate life on, say, planet Pluto. Samir is very fond of the planet Pluto for a very personal reason, but we could land there and still be able to survive and grow and actually make it into an opportunity. So I would stop here on the what I would say is the mother of isms, which is adaptabilism. Thank you very much.
I think